All right, Parmenides. This is going to be a good one, folks. Todd here, Philosopher King. So today we're going to be looking at Parmenides and his great poem on nature, the only thing he wrote. We have some cool fragments of it, enough to do some fun stuff. But we're going to stop really quick to talk about psychedelics. Doors of Perception. Have you heard of that book? It's a good book. Aldous Huxley. AH, we call him. We're going to talk about that first. And that's going to set us up to discuss this journey in a chariot to the mansions of night that's going to take place in the beginning of Parmenides' poem. They call this introduction to Parmenides' poem section the proem. If you ever want to impress your philosophy professor, say, oh yeah, in the proem to Parmenides' poem, is it true that they travel beyond the gates of night and day? And that means that symbolizes like a place where opposites are somehow reconciled into one another. And so you heard that somewhere. Maybe an A. Maybe an A minus. You got to do a little more than that. So we're going to get to that. Chariot ride to the goddess. And then the goddess is going to tell Parmenides and then us, because we get to listen along, the way it is. Also, the way, well, let's say, it's not. It is not. The way it is, the way it is not. All right, so goddess is going to explain it. And then we're going to get to infinity here. All right, infinity. Going all the way. We're in for a little twist at the end, an infinite twist. It's going to involve a chasm, a great chasm. You can't really describe infinity so well, so you got to do make symbols. That's why I did a symbol instead of writing it out. Handwriting's not great, but you can see what I'm doing here. So, Mansions of Night, Proem, the A minus, Doors of Perception. It's going to be a good one. So, Aldous Huxley takes mescaline, right, and has this, like, really good time. Boom. You got Pumpkinhead. Let's give me a little haircut. Some glasses. I don't know if he wears glasses. Huxley, and had a great time. He gave him some wings. Right? He's like flying. He's feeling great. Had a great time. Wrote this book, Doors of Perception, based on the quote from William Blake. When the doors of perception are cleansed, the world will appear as it is, infinite. All right, so Huxley has a good time. But the thing is, Huxley didn't get his own mescaline. Somebody had to give it to him. All right? He's not a cactus farmer. He wasn't a cactus farmer. Who gave him the mescaline? Nobody ever talks about this. Three doctors. One of them, JS. There you go. Sorry for the delay. John Smythes. JS here. Three doctors. Smythes had a bad trip. The other two did all right. Not as good as this guy. They didn't write like books about their trip and like become famous, right? But Smythes, and he was like, not good. Terrified. He described his experience in terms of depersonalization. Let's call it DP, right? Where he lacked the sense of self that he previously had his whole life. Some of you can identify with that, maybe some of you can't. But and he felt like he wasn't himself, and he also had the sense that he was dead. He saw his body like strewn about the floor, and like a hallucination of his body being like dismembered on the ground, and it was horrifying. To ultimate despair. So he also had also akin to this is derealization. DR, which is just like you think reality or what you're experiencing is not real, right? I'm not real. This isn't real. This whole thing's not real, right? And the way Smithies and Huxley both interpret their experience, right, is Jesus, ego here. Let go of my ego. I can't write. Dropping out. All right, absence of ego, depersonalization, a horrifying sense, despair coincides with this like hallucinations and this sense that everything's just falling apart. Homie over here, he's really happy. This like the self-instance of self is like eliminated in the sense now his doors of perception have been cleansed, my friends, and he's enlightened, right? He's like just remember sitting there looking at like some chairs or something, just being like at one with the universe, you know. Happy guy, very good. Wrote a book, good book. I haven't read it. I probably should. But Tale of Two Trips. All right, what does that have to do with Parmenides? Well, as I mentioned, there's going to be a chariot ride to a goddess. All right, let's just put this here. Goddess. Okay, I can't even draw a goddess because they're too pretty. I don't want to do them justice. But I will draw, well, these are like junior goddesses. These daughters of the sun. Boom, we got hair, arms, and then we're going to give them a little light coming from them because they're daughters of the sun, so they're shiny gals, you'd expect. And what they're doing, they've left the mansions of night. For some reason, these gals have been hanging out in the mansions of night, which is like, you know, like the underworld. And Hesiod, that's right in Tartarus, right beyond the gates of night and day, which we'll see they're going to come up. And night and day here. The daughters of the sun leave the mansions at night, and they go to pick this fella up. And this guy, I think they throw him in a chariot. Maybe he's in the chariot already. I'm not sure. And he's got some horses guiding him that turn out, we find out they're immortal. Big head. So, good horses. Good horse. So, being guided by the daughters of the sun, goddess here, there's a gate, right? And there's some doors, and the daughters of the sun here, they whisper some words to this other goddess, Justice, sitting here, DK. She's here, and she hears these words. They went cunning words. They whisper to her, and the gates open gates. I think it goes like this or something. They swing open, and they go through. And when they get through here, there's a great chasm, a gaping gap or yawning gap. And by the way, these doors are the gates of the paths of night and day. Right? So, these references are very Hesiodic. Mansions of night. They are beyond the gates of night and day. The daughters of the sun come from the mansions of night. By the way, at some point they throw off the veils that they have on their head. People want to interpret that different ways. I choose to think it's for the sake of this guy, not for their own sake, but I'll leave that discussion for another time. Mansions of night. Now, it could be, this is what's interesting, the Greek is very, very vague. In fact, you can make an equal grammatical case that this sucker, right, this chariot ride, it could be going upward, right, up to the heavens, right, and it could be going downwards, right, down to the underworld. Based on the grammar, it could be that the daughters of the sun came out of the mansions of night down from below, grabbed him, going into the light to grab him, then taking him back. Also, it could be they came out and grabbed him and took him up into the light, right? Based on the grammar, and then not only on the grammar, on the poetic allusions. Parmenides is just loaded with these allusions from Homer, to the Iliad, the Odyssey, and Hesiod, Theogany in particular in this section, And that's where the gates of night and day reference comes from, which were the mansions of night there. And then when they get through here, there's a yawning gap, which is what you find in Tartarus, right? So mansions of night, it's in the same section of Hesiod. There, Hesiod just says, there was this and there was that. And before the mansions of night, he's talking about Tartarus. And then the gates of night and day meet there, and they speak a word to each other in passing, right? So you already have in Hesiod this sense that you've come to this, what they call axis mundi. Like the point of origin of the world. And it's a place where opposites are reconciled, where the daughters of the sun would live in the mansions of the night, and where you would get, for example, these gates. Turns out they're ethereal. They're made of aether, this pure fiery substance that is the top of the universe, right? But yet they're down here with the mansions of the night, right? And all this Hesiodic and Tartarus, right? So what's going on here? Well, third possibility is going straight too. And they get to the kind of this axis mundi, like in this sense, like the end of a football, so to speak. All these opposites like converge, right? And then things open up maybe this way. I don't know. You can imagine it either way. So what's going on here? Well, before I get too far into that, I just want to say, these wheels are on fire, by the way, which again could be a signal going up. So there's flaming wheels, and like a scene with Hera and the Iliad flying up to see Zeus. So what's going on here? You can't tell which way it's going. I like my way, but you can make a grammatical case and a literary case, I guess, for it to go down. The whole thing's kind of a mess, but it's an intentional mess. And when you take everything into account, I think you could say it's sort of this like place where opposites unite and are reconciled in this way that is rather bizarre. But this idea has been expressed in like mysticism and religious experiences, supreme oneness, and this is where the imagery of the poem points to here. It's more indications later on, but what I want to leave it with for now is this guy experiencing all this. He's got to be experiencing some degree of fear. He's got to be afraid. And scholars may acknowledge this, but they never take into account what the goddess says if it has anything to do with his state of mind, fear, right? And now how do we know he's afraid? Well, first off, just the notion of a flaming, piping hot, chariot, taking you all the way to this goddess beyond the gates of night and day by a great chasm that, may or may not be Tartarus, right? Likely be afraid. Now, maybe he's only a little afraid, maybe he's one of a kind. He's like Huxley here with the mescaline, or maybe he's terrified, right? Like there's a range of experiences here. But the goddess lets us know that he's a little afraid, at least significantly enough for her to address it. First thing she does when he gets there, she greets him warmly, takes him by the right hand, very sweet, and she says, "Welcome, noble youth, to our home, your chariot that has got immortal charioteers. No ill fate sent you here." Right? No ill fate sent you here. Now, this "no ill fate" phrase seems to be a allusion, a reference to chapter 13 of the Iliad, when Menelaus kills this fellow named Pisander. The guy's eyeballs pop out of his head to gruesome death, and it's described as an ill fate, right? So she's telling him you didn't die, right? Or something like that, right? Your eyeballs didn't pop out of your head. Maybe it's a reference that he's beyond the world of the senses, the eyeballs reference. I don't know. I was surprised when I saw that. But there it is. In the Iliad, no more eyeballs. And that's the reference here. So, no ill fate. She's reassuring him that he's alive, right? You're alive. And not only is it no ill fate, but it's rightness and justice that sent you here, right? So whatever he was doing here in this chariot ride, right, which appears to be stillness, right? He's getting carried, right? There's a really passive experience. The first 4 or 5 lines, this word carried, pharaoh, which, where we get the word ferry from, I think, eventually being carried. He's being carried, the mares that carry me, right? So he's very passive, right? And the goddesses are leading them, the horses are immortal doing the work. I don't think he's got to even steer, but he's being carried. But there's one thing he is doing, apparently, or somebody is, because it says he's being carried as far as the heart or the spirit or the longing might reach, right? The thumos, right? As far as the longing might reach, the thumos. So there's an effort, there's a desire that wants to go as far as they can go. It doesn't say it's his desire, right? Maybe it's the horses, maybe it's the daughters of the sons, right? Or maybe it is his, or maybe it's the goddess is summoning him. Really weird how it's worded, but there's a strong desire element to get to this point, some sort of effort. So maybe laying in like stillness, for a really long time, like poor Ananias might have had him do. Mentioned stillness. Well, we're not quite sure. Stillness. Parmenides, influenced by Xenophanes, somebody from his countrymen, the older guy who had an account of God that Parmenides adopts largely when we get to this positive account of the way it is. But it says, according to a good source, ancient source, that it's this poor Ananias, Pythagorean character, the one that brought him to stillness, and that Parmenides was so thankful he built this guy like a shrine after he died, like a big tomb, because he was poor. Parmenides had some money, and this stillness, right? It has a correspondence with what's going to come down later, this unmoving, unshaken heart of truth. So, goddess treats Parmenides as if he needs to be comforted, as if he's afraid, comforts him. And then what does she say next? She welcomes him. She says, far indeed is this path lie from the beaten path of men. And then she tells him it's necessary that he must learn all things, both the unshaken heart of persuasive truth, and the opinions of mortals where there's no true belief at all, and nevertheless, he's going to have to learn how things that appear rightfully appear, so as they travel through all there is, something like that. Very controversial passage we're not going to get to, but he's gonna learn everything, right? Unshaken heart of truth, persuasive truth. Right? He's going to persuade him, persuasive truth, right? So how does she start here, right? And I want to consider the possibility that even though it helped having her grab him by the hand and welcome him and assure him he's not dead, that she hasn't completely alleviated his fear. He still might be like a little like this guy over here on the mescaline that he wasn't ready for, It's possible. Keep an open mind. So, do this way. Come now, I will tell thee, and and do hear my saying and carry it away. There are only 2 ways of inquiry for thought. First, namely, that it is, and that it is impossible for anything not to be. This is a way of persuasion. for truth is its companion. The other, namely, it is not, and that something must needs not be. That, I tell thee, is a wholly untrustworthy path. For you cannot know what is not. That is impossible, nor can you utter it. Right? So, it doesn't seem like, earth-shaking like logic here, but you believe it. Parmenides is really like popular like in 20th century analytic philosophy and 21st century analytic philosophy because he uses logic. He's making arguments here in order to reach counterintuitive conclusions about the nature of reality, right? Which is, people think that's cool. I guess it's a great mystery. But in this case, what is, what is not, is not. You can't, if you want to go down a route of inquiry, right? You want to inquire into something, you gotta, and you can't just inquire what is not at all. You gotta inquire, okay, common sense. Why does she need to tell him this? And she goes on, it must needs be that what can be thought and spoken of is, for it is not possible for it not to be. For it is possible for it to be, and it is not possible for what is nothing to be. This I bid thee ponder. It is not possible for what is nothing to be, right? But it is possible for what is to be. What can be spoken of, thought of, can be, right? That's what you need to focus on. This idea that you can speak of what is not, right? Now, this guy having this maybe led some sense of self, feeling like he's dead, right? This like chasm, this open space, and this question of reality might, it's possible, be having some thoughts about what is not, right? Like on the edge of existence, right? It's seen signs of being in this horrifying place from Hesiod. Might be needed to direct his attention. Don't think about what it's not. Whether or not he's thinking about what is not in terms of what's not happening right now, right? The present moment, or in terms of what doesn't non-existence, like his own non-existence, his own death, or just coming to a place where reality ends and nothing exists. Like a nuclear bomb blows up being, the universe and anything that could possibly be. I don't know. But in the grand sense, what is not, that in that way, don't go there. I want you to focus on what is. What is the way we're going to go. He hands it over, says, this I bid thee ponder, right? For never shall this be proved that the things that are not are. And I do restrain thy thought from this mode of inquiry, right? So she really hits this hard, right? And there's a brief mention of a possible third path that relates to the cosmology later on, which we're not going to discuss, although it's worth noting. The cosmology is the greater part of the poem. It was mostly the cosmology, I guess, in the early days, and this metaphysical stuff is the early part, and it's shorter, but it got preserved. The cosmology got lost. Most of it, we only have fragments and testimonia. Fortunately, we have two philosophers, Sextus Pyrrhus, he preserved the whole proem, the whole introduction chariot ride, and then another fellow named Simplicius, Neoplatonist, I believe, 5th century, 4th century AD, something like that. A fine fellow preserved the whole way of truth, the way it is, the whole positive account of what is, right? Now that you've cleared the deck here, we're not going to talk about what is not, all right? I told you. All right, there's a third way too. We're not doing that. We're doing this, right? So he calls it a legendary path, or story of a path, mythos of a path, right? And she does, the goddess, talking to him. Here's a little bit of what it says. One path is left for him to speak of, legendary path, that it is. Still don't know who the it is, right? Somebody might say, it's being, it's ultimate reality. But strictly speaking, all he's talking about is what is and what is not. There's an undefined it going on here And eventually there's going to be a revealment of the subject. We're going to get there eventually, but we're not there yet. And to get there, it's going to be kind of weird. But that's Parmenides. Sorry, it's weird. So here we go. The one path, namely, of what is. In it are very many signs of what is. It's uncreated, indestructible, alone, singular, complete, immovable, all at once, a continuous one. For what kind of origin will you look for it? Right? What source could it have drawn its increase? Right? And then you get these goddesses involved a little later. Justice will not loosen their feathers and let anything come into being or pass away, but holds it fast. Right? And then a little later you get the goddess, hard necessity keeps it in bonds and a limit on every side, and wherefore it is not permitted to be infinite. For if it is in need of nothing, while it is in need of nothing, while if it were infinite, it would stand in need of everything. Interesting. Infinite, because infinite is incomplete. It's going to keep going forever. So no, it's limited. Right? It rejects the infinite. What do you think about that? Boom. Knocking it out. Not this. This. It's not that. Not the Parmenides. Right? Going on here. Motionless. Fate made it whole and immovable. Motionless, you know how you translate it. No motion, thanks to the goddess Fate. Chained it. Can't move. And it's confined with limits. It's limited. Right? Not limitless. Similar to infinite. And then... Aha. I gotta change translations, sure. Reality, Peter Kingsley. And for there is nothing else and will be nothing else apart from being, because fate has bound it to be whole, unmoving. Its name shall be everything. Its name shall be everything. And so, actually, correct this translation a little bit. For there is nothing else and will be nothing else apart from it, because fate has bound it to be whole, unmoving. Its name shall be everything. Every single name that mortals have invented, convinced they are all true. Birth and death, existence, non-existence, change of place, alteration of bright color. In other words, the world of the senses, sense experience, right? Things come into place, into existence, out of existence, including ourselves, right? Colors change, place changes, right? Things moving around. Now, people talk about that, and now the goddess is saying, really, when they're saying that, they believe it's true, but really the proper is, when they say the word is, the proper referent for that is this singular, whole, continuous, undivided, timeless, like unto a sphere, then to the bulk of the sphere. It's like a continuous. Some people think it means a physical sphere, but I think it's a metaphor. In any case, it's not the world that we experience, right? Unless maybe you're in a cave, laying down in a cave in utter stillness for like 3 days by some poor Pythagorean who's been trained in the arts of the priest of Apollo. Perhaps there's a possibility where this might make sense, right? Where you know you're able to intuit, because there's no senses in this point. You're dark, right? Maybe you're hearing like you're the priest's voice or something, but you're not hearing much, I don't think. And it's possible that such a situation, being just this pure, immovable, continuous, eternal thing, I get it. I feel it now, especially if you're on mescaline, you know, or a similar state induced by some sort of practice that resulted in the stillness. Okay, that's the hypothesis. So yeah, fear. Now, Why? What was going on here? Why would the need to purge? What is not? How is that going to help him out? And discuss that a little bit in terms of being afraid of what's going to happen to him or the unknown. But I want to talk a little more, like, I guess, broadly philosophically for just a second. Much of this imagery here from Hesiod, the mansions of night and Tartarus, and then in Homer and Hades and the afterlife portrayal there, it's like a chance. You have this fear that you're at the edge of reality and just nothingness awaits. And but instead of just taking it to its logical conclusion, well, nothingness is not, right? You add a little something to it, right, and make it this horrifying place like Tartarus, where the wind will blow you down, blow you side to side while you drop for a long time. And maybe in Hades, where you lose every good part of yourself, but you still are this like have this existence as a shadow with no mind or power, just regrets. Right? He's not very good except for a handful of people in Homer. So this, like, what I want to call this, like, reified nothingness, this fancy word, reified, to make real. Right? You take nothingness and you, instead of taking it to its conclusion and dropping it, you make it real. All right? And you imagine it, and you can do that with, like, the future, and you can do that with the past, and you can do that with the unknown. Right? The unknown, and like the death is certainly happens after death is certainly one qualify there. And so she's purges this, right? Purges all this stuff, right? And this idea has been so reinforced by this imagery of mansions of night and Tartarus and Hades, so get rid of that. Focus on this, all right? And then you do it enough, and you find a calm heart of being. You must feel pretty good, and maybe you're feeling, if not like this guy, pretty happy, right? Right? So, pretty good. Now, I want to say that's probably only a preliminary stage here, which maybe be similar to the stage in Theravada Buddhism, Samatha, I believe. Hope I'm not butchering that. Samatha. And it's like a calming stage, right? Calming down, but, then you move on into deeper stuff. The way this plays out in Parmenides is there's a movement to the cosmology, the second part of the poem, and the goddess gives a warning to pay attention to the deceptive arrangement of my words, and you have to pay attention to what she says there, figure out that mystery, apply it to the cosmology, and then tie it in with the rest of this poem, right? The doctrine on being and non-being, and the introduction. And that's why we have to go back to the introduction. I'm going to leave the cosmology and that whole problem where the mortals make this horrible error in naming things for another time. It's really interesting. Well, I want to go back to the chariot ride here, because I want to look at this great chasm. It's in the Greek chasm, a Chinese, right? So ch-ch-ch sound repeating, which it's kind of repeating it because it's already a chasm's already telling you something, and then it's like no, it's a gaping chasm, a yawning chasm. It's huge, which would make one think of Tartarus in this context, as we discussed. However, there's another possibility that this fella opens up. So let's just hear the gates. Let's just say, make it a little wider. Here are the gates, and they've been flung open, and the chariot goes through, and then you come across, maybe there's a yawning gap down here. Right? You're going across, like, oh wow, look, Tartarus below, right? You keep going straight, or that's a kind of obvious reference, but this fella Mitchell Miller suggests, well, hey, look at this word, the way it's used. Parmenides is the earliest use they have of it, they can find of it, but Sophocles, he uses it, the second use, and it refers to a labyrinth with like an open ceiling. It's upward. And so maybe it's upward, right? Could be down, could be up. Right, why is that important? Well, one thing that really bothers some scholars is that even though being is the main teaching here, right, that the source of this being, the teaching, it takes place in this, apparently in the mansions of night, right, even though, because they explain the gates are made of aether, if I didn't mention that already, so there's this like mixture of the above and below, right, this axis mundi, but what's really significant here for these scholars is like the source, the ultimate like authority seems to be night. Right? The goddess is not named. There's this, looks like this is happening in the mansions of night. The daughters of the sun come from the mansions of the night explicitly, and they lead the way. Right? There's no indication they were being held prisoner there. Don't think. They seem happy enough. So what's with this privilege of night? Like a teaching about a poem about a teaching about what is, where the non-being is cast aside. What's going on here? Well, that's where analyzing this poem from in terms of the state of mind of this guy that the goddess is dealing with comes in, right? It makes sense for her. The guy's afraid. This like sense of the unknown and that which the mind can't quite comprehend, can't think, being doesn't really register, right? Well, hey, you focus on what is, right, and forget that stuff, right? Calm yourself down. But there is other stuff going on here related to this idea of the infinite. We're going to bring it back. Bring the infinite back. By the way, in this context, there's a famous philosopher of the time, Anaximander, that his doctrine was the infinite was the ultimate. It embraced the cosmos, right? So going up here, or you go down here, depending on how you interpret this yawning chasm. Right? Now, if you go up here, I presume this like thing that's like beyond the universe and this divine like highest principle ever, you're probably going to end up something like this, right? If you really you get sucked up, right? You're not going to have him write a book when you come down, right? If you go down here, right, Tartarus, then you're going to end up like John Smithy's The Bad Trip, right? You see in your body like on the floor, dismembered, and this horrible torture experience in Tartarus, right? So there's alternative possibility, other way with this gap, escaping gap. It could be upward, could be downwards, but also the chariot is said when it passes through here to continue on the broad way. It's a broad way. Gates open up. Broad way, and that's the way. You go sideways too, just like in the original chariot ride, right? There's these possibilities, right? Now Parmenides goes the broad way, and that is the way of, I believe, the way of inquiry, right? Because the goddess addresses, first thing she says to him after she calms him down and gives him like a hug and tells him he's not dead, she's like, right, let me tell you about the two paths for inquiry. This guy's an inquirer. He's not getting sucked down here. He's not getting sucked down here. He's a philosopher. And she tells him, you got to learn the whole thing, the unshaken heart of truth, right? And the opinions of mortals. Like, she gives him a whole cosmology, right? The broad path, inquiry, right? And then he's a philosopher, right? And that's pretty cool stuff. Broad path, broad way. And the concept of the infinite here, the way this is going to play out is, well, there's certain aspects of this experience that you can't think or speak of. There's what is called, often in mystical experiences, religious experiences, ineffable. I believe this is one of the criteria of William James for a mystical experience. It's got to be beyond words about it, and you see this kind of thing in the literature. Well, in this kind of experience here with the goddess beyond the gates of night and day, where all these opposites are reconciled, stands to reason some aspect of it was ineffable. Goddess is unnamed, something that's Persephone. I'm guessing that Parmenides didn't give a prescription of this goddess, especially if it was Persephone, because probably hard to do, probably hard to think being about her, because ineffability. So there's this positive sense of non-being, of what can't be spoken of, that you can't think of it, you can't spoke of it, but there's an acknowledgement that it's a source and that it's there. But this Parmenides, is a young man, he's called a youth in this chariot ride. He's not ready for it. Right? On my psychological reading, he's not ready for it. He needs to first get rid of this idea. Don't think about that. Focus on what is. And then after he shows out, she's got some cosmological lessons for him. But I skipped us ahead to reflecting on this Mansions of Night, this chariot ride journey, in order to reveal the role here of the infinite vis-a-vis the ineffable. Right? Well, you can't contain it with words. Talk about how it is, because that aspect of it. Now, this idea of the ineffable, and after Parmenides, Plato comes along and he writes a dialogue called The Parmenides, and he does this dialectical exploration of the one, which is ultimately, if it's going to be a pure one, it's the first hypothesis, when it's explored predicatively as a predicate. Well, if you're going to say it's one, that's its really thing, well, you can't even say anything about it, because you're going to attribute some multiplicity to it. You can't say it's whole, you can't say it's part, you can't say it's in motion or it's rest or in itself or in another or any of these things. In fact, you can't say it is at all, because you'd have its essence, and you'd have to give it a name. If you give it a name, that's multiplicity. So however serious you want to take this idea of the one became this big thing in antiquity, and Neoplatonism, made this their supreme object of philosophical contemplation and mystical experience. Right? The one, also the good. Good is the one, according to Plato and the Neoplatonists. Object of all desire, source of all unity, and ineffable. Ineffable revealed through the dialectic, right? The logical dialectic, right? As opposed to through the mystical encounter, which is part of the tradition too, but they do both, right? Get your feet back on the ground and understand your experience. And so, the one, and the way it is being, the one, the whole, continuous, eternal, undivided being. Now, what I want to suggest is that this place of the goddess beyond the gates of the paths of night and day, is where opposites are reconciled or merged, eliminated in some way. There's some opposites mixed here too, right? They're all reconciled, right? Including what is and what is not, being and non-being, right? Because there is this positive sense of non-being, right? And negative. Now, it's a mix, right? Now, you can go all the way to just the pure way it is and run from that other stuff, but it's going to creep back in pretty soon enough, right? The ineffable aspect of the experience. But there is also the part of the experience you can describe, which is very comforting, the whole, complete, undivided, eternal, right? And we could read Enlightenment accounts from different traditions where they'll use those kinds of words, right? Oneness, right? So, mix them up, right? The experience of one being is available. The goddess knows about it, tells him about it. Hopefully he experiences it. But there's also this ineffable source beyond words that permeates this whole scene. And it's, maybe we should do better. Like a yin yang thing. That's a pretty bad one. The one being mixed together in some sort of way, right? And vis-a-vis the ineffable and ultimate reality. First and second hypothesis of the Neoplatonic tradition of reading Plato's Parmenides. And there you have it. We got the infinite in here. Go up and go down to Tartarus. Good trip, bad trip. Or you can go through the broad way, which is a way of inquiry. You want to understand your experience and all of reality. And there's a goddess waiting there to tell you all about it if you're Parmenides anyway. So there you have it. Everything, same check, everything, kind of weird. Anyway, I bid thee ponder. Thanks for paying attention. If you're still there, watch it again. Please like and subscribe, and take care.